No biggie. Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for Nerds by Nerds, and today I am hanging out with Doug Davison from Fantasy Grounds, and we're going to be talking about gaming. I'm sure virtual tabletops are going to come up, D&D, and whatever other nerdy stuff pops into our minds. So, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing great. Doing great. Thanks for having me.
It's good to see that you did not get washed away with Florida.
Yeah, I know. It was. We moved in last year, just about 2 weeks before Hurricane Matthew came through, and we got evacuated. Now, so we had a mandatory evacuation again this time, but we decided to hole up and just kind of ride out the storm and see how it went. So it's been entertaining for sure.
People like to diss on New Jersey, but very rarely do we get evacuated. We don't get earthquakes. We don't really get
Yeah,
too much crazy stuff going on here. It's not on fire.
yeah. As long as someone's not shut down your bridges on you.
yeah, then we're good.
Yeah.
It's all right. We have a bunch of bridges, so we have plenty of choices.
Nice.
Besides, I'm close to two major cities. I got the beaches. I got mountains. We got it all.
Yeah.
Nuclear waste, everything. Three-eye fish. So, once again, I'd like to thank you for sponsoring the Saver Dice game. That's been a lot of fun. We actually played that last night, which has been going really well. We've been ranking pretty good in the in our category. So, as kind of a new show, I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, and you guys are wrapping up your first kind of season on it too, right?
We are halfway through.
Okay.
So, but Cody's already looking at season 2, so he's just looking ahead.
Yeah.
Why we just have fun and play games.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
So that's been a lot of fun so far. We are excited for season 2, and at the same time, we're still excited to be playing season 1. We've also been talking about expanding some things over there as well. So that's cool. It's just been a fun opportunity for us to get together and do stuff together as collaborators. I mean,
Sure.
as creators and collaborate.
So what kind of character are you playing in that game?
I am playing a Goliath that has been reflavored as a half ogre, and because I don't know, for whatever reason, I just hate the Goliath lore and the Goliath race, but I like them mechanically.
Oh yeah.
So I just like to reflavor them as some kind of giant kin or half ogres.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, that's one of the great things about role-playing games in general is that you're not confined to what's available out of the box. You can just, like you said, reflavor it or take parts that you like and then mix it with other stuff. I do that with other games. Like I'll take stuff out of an entire game system and then patch it into a different one just because I like a certain mechanic,
Yeah, we literally did that with Shadowrun. We played Shadowrun, but we used the Cypher system rule set to do it with.
Right, yeah.
And then our GM at the time was like, he was starting to do some research on Shadowrun, and then he realized people are already doing the same thing with the Apocalypse engine. So there's a lot of people that like really love that setting.
Yeah.
But just aren't super thrilled about the rule set.
Yeah. Well, I saw that recently. They had we do a lot of stuff with Savage Worlds, and then Rifts. They did the Savage Rifts, and so that was a lot of the same sort of comments I saw as people were like, "Oh, I love the Rift setting, but the rules are just a kind of a slog to get through." Whereas they really like the Savage Worlds rules because they play very fast and loose. So people bought onto that pretty heavily. It looked like for that reason.
Yeah, we actually backed that Kickstarter. I haven't played it yet. Too many games, not enough time is always always a problem. But yeah, like we've done different things with the Palladian system, and like they always like early on they are actually getting a lot of the really cool licenses like Robotech and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Mm-hmm.
But the rule system is horrible. So
yeah.
Unless you get, and I guess unless of course you like that, then it's play your game however you want. But for us, we didn't care for it. Like we recently, I say recently, right? Like 4 or 5 years ago, revisited it with Heroes Unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about the Palladium system, it is so like 80s. The way games were built in the 80s, and and the rules are clunky. They're not balanced even. Like, I don't think nothing has to be like 100% balanced, but
yeah,
literally when you're a guy you have a guy in a mech on your party and the other guy's basically like a hobo, like that's a little bit too swingy.
Yeah. Mechs and hobos. It didn't catch on as much as Dungeons and Dragons, but it's all good.
Yeah. So how's Fantasy Grounds treating you? How long have you guys been around now?
So Fantasy Grounds itself was released around 2004, and it was created by 3 guys out in Finland originally, Villa, and Tero. So they had the basic kind of engine created and support for D20 games pretty much, and that was about it for the most part. And then there were some people that were there was an infrastructure and kind of a system built up to where you could create your own rule sets to support other game systems. And so over time, some of the community members started getting in and kind of monkeying around with it. Another group called Digital Adventures came in, and they actually started securing licenses for rule sets to play on Fantasy Grounds from third parties. So like we got Savage Worlds and Call of Cthulhu and Castles and Crusades, some other ones. But that was actually handled by a different company and wasn't directly provided by Smiteworks. And so I came in, I bought it as an end user, and I think it was early 2008. And I like just instantly fell in love with how they kind of put it all together. And it was a little clunky at first. I mean, there's some kind of strangeness to, when you're used to like a Windows application, you get in and then you see how Fantasy Grounds does it. And at first I was like, this is kind of weird, but I just watched a couple of videos, and then once I started using it, I kind of was like, okay, well, this makes sense now. Once you get the basics, it all kind of fits together. And then I was a software developer that had my own consulting company. So I started building out like a Star Wars Saga Edition rule set, and I really liked how flexible the system was. And so I reached out to him and asked if I could buy the company from him, because I saw that they could take in a much different direction than what they were headed. And they weren't originally interested in it and selling it, but over time kind of talked them into it, and the rest is history. So that in 2009 is when we bought it, or when I bought it, and then John joined the company in early 2010, and we've had it now longer than the original owners have had it, and I think now it very much feels like our system now as opposed to someone else's system.
So the skeleton of Fantasy Grounds, does it still exist, or did you guys come in and completely revamp it?
So we didn't completely revamp it. We started off with kind of some small projects here and there, and making improvements kind of that were small and digestible. And so like some of the first things we did, it was funny because there were just some kind of strange, goofy things within the interface, like the token box, for instance. The funny part about that, we always joke about how some of the choices were. So the original token bag was basically a bag that you would open up, and it had tokens just mushed in there randomly, and they were all laying on top of each other. So you actually, it was supposed to be like you were playing at the table and you opened up a bag of tokens that were all jumbled up and you couldn't see them, and you had to like click them and move them and like sort through. I'm like, what the hell? That doesn't make any sense at all. Like, why are they not sorted and at least presentable? So just kind of goofy stuff like that. We started kind of going through and cleaning it up, and we've continued to do that a lot. And over the last, I'd say about 3 years, we've been working on doing a complete rewrite in Fantasy Grounds and Unity. We're calling it our Fantasy Grounds Unity version. And so that's a much more modern development platform, whereas the old version was written in C++. And so I think we're going to, that's going to help bring it forward again, into a more modern interface.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around the bag of tokens.
Yeah, it was hilarious. And they had a scramble button. You could right click and say scramble, and it would like remix them back up, which I guess would work fine if you had like 10 tokens, right? Maybe you could open them up, but and they were scaled relative to each other. So if you were looking for a big token, you're like, oh, there's my dragon. I can see it underneath these other 5 little goblins and kobold. You could move them out of the way. But I'm like, I don't know. Doesn't make sense.
I guess they just wanted to give that real table feel for the GM of going, where the hell is this thing?
It's kind of like, I guess, if you have tokens and people roll dice and knocked over your tokens, that'd be funny to see once, but like, you don't really want to build that into the interface where you're rolling the dice and it's really knocking your stuff over. I mean, that would just get annoying. So
yeah, that is definitely an interesting choice. It's like, we have this thing that can actually sort and organize things for us. What do we want to do with it? I don't know. How about we mix everything up and make it as difficult as possible?
Yeah. So there were a few design choices like that we were anxious to undo those, and there are probably still a few of those little things hanging on, but not to the extent that it had originally, of course.
So Embershade has a question. Will Unity be provided for Ultimate license holders?
So what we're looking to do is, traditionally we've always done every upgrade that we've ever released to Fantasy Grounds has been free, going all the way back to 2004, basically. And this is the very first time that we're looking to charge an upgrade fee to move over from what we're calling like Classic, Fantasy Grounds Classic, which is the current edition, to the Fantasy Grounds Unity version. And so we're going to have some form of an upgrade fee, and it's going to be a tiered one with kind of a minimum. So we think the minimum upgrade fee is going to be probably $15 for an Ultimate license holder. And that would be, our recommended buy-in is going to be at the $15 if you're within, like, say, a year old on the license. And then from that, we're going to have recommended levels and let you kind of choose where you feel like you fit. But we're going to say, basically for every year that you've had the license, we think it should probably be $15 more. So if you've used your license for 5 years, we think the upgrade should be, should be more for you than it would be for someone who just bought it, basically. But at the end of the day, if you don't think that fits your personal usage level, like maybe you got it and then life got in the way and you didn't actually use it as much, then you could, select yourself into a lower level and say, okay, I only want to pay $15 upgrade. So it's going to be up to you what you feel like you need, what makes the best, fair value upgrade for you. So
when you guys switch to Unity, is the interface as it is now going to go away?
It's going to be, well, the big part was we wanted it to be backward compatible. So it's going to look very much the same. It's going to have support for, it's a 64-bit operating system programs. So it's going to support, much higher memory, larger images, all that sort of stuff. And it's going to have enhancements in a lot of area, but the basic core interface is going to be very similar to what it was before. And that's kind of something that's moving parallel to our Unity development. So we've continued to make some strides and some improvements on the rule set and the layout there. Like in the recent update we just rolled out, 3.3.3, I think is what it is now. Like now there's a new little tutorial thing that pops up that says, hey, if you're just now creating your campaign, you'll want to, set your campaign options. You'll want to load your modules. And so just making it more user-friendly is something that we can do somewhat separate from Unity. And then within Unity, where you're going to see the big improvements are going to be like in images. You'll be able to do map building and some stuff like that. That's going to be, a big change. Line of sight. It's just going to be more functionality that we can tap into.
So I do have a question. So like, only the GM has to actually have the Ultimate license for everyone to play, right?
Correct.
So I take it that means the person with the Ultimate license has to be the GM.
Yes, and that's unfortunately something that's probably still going to be the case. We had some people that asked, hey, can I buy the Ultimate and then let someone else use it, let them GM basically under my Ultimate license? And so we haven't really cracked that nut yet at this point. And that, we might come up with some inspiration on how we can handle that by the time we roll out the Unity version, but it's definitely not something we're looking at for our phase one. Our phase one, we want to just get out there and be like, this is Fantasy Grounds like it, but on steroids, and it's got some extra, capabilities built into it.
So what are the capabilities you guys are looking to upgrade?
So the big things are with maps and images. We want to start off with enhancements on the 2D side to make it easier to scale images that you pull from outside of Fantasy Grounds, lay our grids over top, clean up that interface a lot more, add line of sight in there with a really nice fog of war, and with some collaborative fog of war so that it's on a user by user basis, but then the DM can see kind of where all the different components have been revealed, and then it will re-hide it in a kind of pseudo state so that as you move through an area, you know what the room looked like, but you don't necessarily know if there's new monsters moving into the area, that sort of stuff. We want to do the line of sight, obviously, make that easy to apply. And on some systems where you have to kind of draw out different shapes and stuff, we just want to make that as smooth as possible. And then we want to have nice tileable layers and maps that you can draw on. You can add, you know, multiple images in as backgrounds, and you can lay your trees and placeables, and maybe have roofs on buildings that you can turn on or off, that sort of stuff. We have a really cool drawing paintbrush that we're working on the final details, which makes it really nice if you have like a road texture or a wall texture, like a I don't know, like a stone wall texture. You can just kind of paint and draw it onto your map very easily. So I think that stuff is going to be really, really well received once we roll it out. And then kind of on the upper end, on the 2D side, is the animations and the effects. So we have one video we released a little while back showing how we have like it raining and thundering and lightning and all that kind of stuff, or snow, or you can have like if you're playing a futuristic game, you can go into like a X-ray vision, like a night vision mode and stuff, and just lots of cool little things that, to be honest, that stuff came pretty easily, because that's one of the nice things in Unity is they have these great abilities to add that sort of stuff. So animations and, you know, fires that actually crackle and light up an area and stuff like that. And then once that's kind of our phase 1 that we're wanting to roll out. And then phase 2 on the images are going to get into being able to take a 2D interface and flip it into a 3D, or what we're calling like a 2.5D. So it would take your maps and it would basically allow you to do it isometric and spin it around, do that sort of stuff. All of your tokens, and then we can start doing stand-up style tokens, kind of like you would see, you know, if you buy like the pawn collections and stuff like that from different publishers. And then you could still use all your 2D assets and have them automatically convert into the pawn type thing. Then you get a little bit of a pseudo 3D sort of interface. And then when we bought Tabletop Connect, Carl Pinder was working on his own virtual tabletop. So he actually already had all the stuff to where he's building full 3D interfaces with multiple levels. He has like a video where he built out a whole tavern system with 2 levels, and you can take stairs up to the 2nd level, and it's got torches and sconces on the walls, and you know, you can actually look through windows and open doors and all this kind of stuff in full 3D if you want to. And then you can have 3D miniatures that you move around. So that's kind of our phase 2 or 3 that we'll be able to get into as we tighten up everything for the first release. And then go ahead.
Isn't that kind of what Watts was talking about with 4th edition, but it never happened?
Correct. Yeah. And so we're building in towards that direction, but we don't want to. What we don't want to have happen is we don't want to lessen the experience for the majority of our players who are going to play in 2D. And so if you look at every book that comes out, everything's in 2D, right? So you don't want to have to take, say, Tomb of Annihilation and then keep it in development for a year as you build 3D assets for everything. That would be, you know, I think that would be the wrong direction for us to take. But what we could do is we could say, okay, so say when Tomb of Annihilation releases in print, we'll release it for Fantasy Grounds right away, and all the stuff's in and supported for 2D. But then people could go back and say, okay, we really want this part of the encounter or this dungeon. We could have an add-on where we say, okay, do you want to have the 3D version of this whole area? You know, and that could be kind of a cool little add-on, or people could build that themselves within the app, you know, where they're building out the dungeon and they're taking the 2D stuff and building the 3D stuff on top of it. And, you know, so for people that like that, they'll have that as an option that they can play with eventually.
Now, I love using Fantasy Grounds as the player, right? Like,
yeah.
Super sweet. You know, Jim has all the hard work to do. And
yeah.
And I get to just show up, and I've played in other games with virtual tabletops. And when I watch the GMs, and they're really good at that stuff, they remind me of a conductor with an orchestra. I'm still kind of grognardish and old school and like theater of the mind. Even when we play in person, like we do everything theater of the mind until like an actual fight happens, and then we kind of like break out minis. They might be what they are, they might not. We're using like pencils and stuff for our walls, just to make the tactical stuff a little bit easier.
Yeah. And so a lot of our focus is actually on the Dungeon Master side, because we feel like that's where the most work needs to be done to make a game fun. And so we try to make as many little bells and whistles that, you know, it still takes a while to learn how to DM effectively and how to utilize all those tools. But by the time you get proficient in it, you know, you can fly through campaigns much quicker as a DM than you could otherwise. Like I can't even imagine trying to run a game without it. Even if I'm playing in person, I always used to keep track of my campaign, to do my my campaign prep, have all my encounters calculated, and you know, track experience and divide it out, all that kind of, like, all the math stuff. I mean, that's what computers are for, right? So we just try to utilize Fantasy Grounds to do all that, to do all the tracking and the initiative tracking, managing all the effects and your party inventory at the end of the day. Because that's, you know, when you play in person, you kill the bad guys and then you spend 15 minutes afterwards, you know, someone's writing down all the loot that you got, and half of it might be identified, some of it's not identified yet because your players rolled like crap, you know, that kind of stuff. And then you end up making your way back to a town, and then you have to go back through all your notes and figure out, okay, I think we've got 5 battle axe plus ones, we've got 2 crossbow, and then you're looking up the prices for everything and then figuring out how much money everybody gets and divides. Just take all that stuff off the table and just, you know, let the computer do all that stuff for you, and get back into playing.
So yeah, I know people that do exactly what you're saying. They play in person and they still use a virtual tabletop. And also what we're seeing more and more is people are taking big screen TVs, you know, flat screen TVs, laying them down and playing on those.
Right, yeah.
So, you know, the virtual tabletop is going to be ideal for that kind of circumstances. Comic Book University has a question, but I think you actually answered it. Because he wants to know about plans to animate using animated GIFs and stuff, and that's exactly what you're talking about with the fires and the different weather and stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Now the method that we're going to use for that, whether or not it's going to support the animated GIFs or if it's going to be a different mechanism, it'll probably be a different mechanism. There's some kind of nuances with animated GIFs specifically that we probably won't do, but we will have some animation in there, especially with regard to like light sources and some special effects and particle effects and stuff like that. So for spells, we should be able to get in and start doing actual spell explosions and some kind of cool stuff like that.
Yeah, Professor Bell from Comic Book University is actually running a Marvel Phase Rip game for us.
Yeah.
Like we're just getting started with that. He's talking about maybe using Fantasy Grounds to do that. Is there a lot of support in there for different settings, like modern settings?
So there, you know, in the current version, I want to say that someone was working on a Phase Rip rule set or a Phase Rip compatible rule set. That's one of the, you were talking earlier before we went on the stream about too many games and not enough time to play it. So yeah. I've got Phase Rip games are still on my high level. I'm like, I want to go back and play, you know, some of those games and try that, but I've never actually had a chance to play it. So I don't know all the nuances of that one, but I'm pretty sure that there's one called maybe or something. I think that like the color charts, I don't know, but I want to say that someone on the forums was creating a rule set to do some basic support for that.
I'm gonna have to poke around at that. Yeah, the Phase Rip is the one with the color charts. It looks like kind of like a periodical table a little bit.
Yeah. And I liked how they had the different power levels were descriptive, it looked like. So, you know, do you have amazing level strength, or do you have, like, you know, ungodly or, you know, godly level strength, or whatever the different category names were?
Yeah.
I can't remember, but I thought that was cool.
It's kind of a dead game, but we've been trying to resuscitate it a little bit.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't even know if it's a property that's owned by anyone, because it was TSR originally, and I guess it's kind of shelved now. I mean, I think there's been at least 2, if not 3 other versions of a Marvel game since.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the problem, I think, with some of those games, is that it's a double license kind of situation. So you have the actual game itself, the RPG, and then you also have the property that it's using for it. So like in that case, Marvel. And Marvel stuff, they've maintained, you know, their rights on stuff, even if the game itself is no longer, being used. So it makes it kind of questionable. I know we were interested in doing Star Wars, like some of the earlier versions of Star Wars Saga Edition, the Star Wars D20 Revised Edition rules and stuff like that. But those are in the state where we can't really do anything with it, you know, just because they've already handed that over. It's now on a different, Fantasy Flight Games now has it or something. So yeah, even if we could, even though we have a relationship with Wizards of the Coast, they can't republish and recreate content, even for their old stuff that they already had printed, you know.
Well, it's like anything. The more hands you have in the pot, the more difficult it becomes.
Yeah.
Get anything done. So yeah, so that's definitely cool, because like I said, we might check that out for playing our Marvel game. And we were recently contacted by someone who's talking about, maybe a Mutants and Masterminds game, which might be, I don't know, I can't really talk about it yet because it's still in the air. But
yeah.
I was like blown away when I got the email. So that might happen, which would be really cool. So, what about gaming yourself? Are you in any games right now?
So right now I'm playing in a game on Wednesday evenings, which unfortunately is the same time that you guys are playing, pretty much like an hour beforehand. And we've been playing through the Tales of the Yawning Portal, and so we're actually rotating the DM as we move through each one of those adventures. And so I actually DM'd the very first one, which was the Sunless Citadel, and then the next one was the Forge of Fury. We just finished that one. And then we're getting ready to head into the Hidden Shrine of Tamawachin, or however you pronounce that one.
It's unpronounceable by the human tongue.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Are you guys playing online or in person?
We're playing online, and it's a group of different streamers that are playing in that one as well. So people who've used Fantasy Grounds quite a bit. Used to have the digital DM. And Rob 2E and a couple other guys that do a lot of streams for Fantasy Grounds.
Are you okay? So you guys are streaming that game?
Yeah. It's normally I'll restream it on our site, on the Twitch Fantasy Grounds site page or whatever, and then it's normally like each of the guys is streaming it on their own separate channel as well. So it's kind of different. You have an opportunity, you can flip around and see. Sometimes you can see what the DM's doing, and then you can flip over and see if you want to watch the player side instead. So it's kind of a little different experience, I think.
That sounds different. And they all stream to the same one at the same time. I'm like a total noob when it comes to streaming and Twitch.
Yeah, me too. And that's one of the things we're hopefully, maybe we can improve upon that and have some more built-in sort of streaming options for Fantasy Grounds at some point too.
That would be pretty cool as well. I know one of the things that like D&D Beyond was talking about was the Twitch integration, which is probably going to be a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But they have an unfair advantage there being owned by Twitch.
Yeah, and it looks like they've got some cool stuff planned to be interesting to see with the overlays and how your hit points can, you can have it change it directly on your overlay and link it in. So I don't know how much of that's going to be publicly available in their API for developers to be able to work with, but if we can, we'll definitely be looking to do that sort of stuff down the road too, where you can have your character portrait maybe drop into a certain part of your overlay automatically. It's weird because right now you've got multiple utilities you use for streaming, like OBS or XSplit or Game Show. I think there's a couple other different ones. And so that's what's actually controlling all the overlay sort of stuff right now. So if Twitch continues and they add more of that feature directly into Twitch, it'd be kind of interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but that's going to affect the playing field on a much larger scale than just tabletop role-playing games. Then anything being streamed on Twitch that people are now using these other services for might hurt other industries as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So who knows? The technology just advances so fast now.
Yeah. And a lot of those people get bought up too. Like if they're doing a cool service or feature, then it wouldn't be surprising to see them get snapped up by Twitch directly. Well,
that's true. Well, I mean, that's how you got kind of Fantasy Grounds, right? So
yeah.
That's how it goes. So
except I wasn't the Amazon size.
Well, yeah. You weren't a mega corporation from Shadowrun.
Yeah.
Not yet. Maybe someday.
Yeah. Got aspirations.
Yeah. So, are there any features that you would like to see in Fantasy Grounds that but you don't feel like the technology is there or will be there anytime soon?
Yeah, there's definitely some wish list things that I have on it. Actually, I try to write them down as I come across them because technology, like you said, moves so fast. You have to constantly revisit stuff, and it's getting pretty close. And so some of the areas, and this is in my pipe dream kind of section of our feature list that we're working towards would be things like, I really think it'd be cool to have, I don't know if you've seen like Face Rig and some of the things like that they have on, I think they're on Steam, to where you can basically have your camera record your face and then map points to your face to where it'll kind of like do a face mapping and then map that onto another 3D object face. So if people are running like a Tabaxi Rogue or something like that, you got some cat looking person, then as you're actually talking, it looks like your Tabaxi Rogue is talking instead, you know. So instead of it just being a flat portrait, you could actually do some kind of augmented reality stuff to where it'll really make the role playing just really pop out, you know, so that instead of seeing five prototypical gamers sitting around a table, you'd see what their avatars look like, you know. But it would be like you're interacting with them.
Tristan, does Fantasy Grounds allow you to pop out windows, or is it contained within the main program window? It does have pop out windows.
It doesn't pop out of the actual application interface itself, and that's what some people have asked for, to be able to pop stuff out to put stuff onto different monitors completely. But instead what we have is everything is inside of the one application window, and then from there you can scale that window across multiple monitors and you know, move stuff around within the same interface. That works better if both of your interfaces have the same like resolution, so that it scales kind of evenly across. But if you've got like one 4K monitor attached and another like, you know, just standard 1080p monitor, then that's when it gets a little bit wonky, you know, if you're trying to stretch across that sort of an interface. But the other thing you could do is you could run, and some people do this, you mentioned earlier, and I think it might have been before the call, where people are actually running it in person and having a TV facing up in the middle of the table. There was a big article that just went, you know, semi-viral just like last week, where someone had built out a table for $150 and then stuck a TV display faced up and hooked it up to like a 4K workstation. And so you could run basically the Dungeon Master screen, you know, instead of using a DM screen, you use your laptop kind of as that screen where you're controlling everything for Fantasy Grounds, but then you have a second player instance that's running on a TV display, and you use that instead. So instead of pulling out your miniatures and doing all that kind of stuff, you know, you can use it to move people around on a map and, you know, share handouts that everyone can see instead of holding your book or your laptop around, you know. You just kind of shoot that out to there. And so, you know, that's a pretty common way for people to use it right now.
That sounds way too complicated for me.
Yeah. But it's getting cheaper and cheaper to do. And so, you know, TVs nowadays are just ridiculously cheap compared to what they used to be. So still a little pricey, but TVs are definitely dropping.
So I had a question, lost it. Sorry. Halfway through, so we're going to jump into the chat for our roll call, where we find out where people are weighing in from, and you guys can bust that out now. So, what kind of projection do you guys have on Unity?
So that's a good question, and that's something we get asked a lot. And so we don't have an ETA at this point. It looks like it's going to be 2018. I don't think we're going to hit the 2017 mark at this point, unless we're really, really lucky. We still have some things on the networking side that we kind of stalled out on, and so we're trying some new stuff there. That's one of our other big things too. Is so one of the big challenges with Fantasy Grounds early on, it's a hurdle. I mean, I don't think it's that big of a challenge once people kind of understand the problem, but it is a hurdle for new users, is when you want to host a game, you have to do router configuration sometimes. So you have to do a port forwarding. If your router doesn't automatically have, you know, UPnP set up, you got to actually log on to your router and send 1802 traffic to your PC. And it, you know, once you've done it once, it's really pretty easy, pretty quick. It takes you, you know, just 2 or 3 minutes to do that setup. But for people that are, you know, that are not tech savvy, or you know, it's a scary thing for people to go, oh, what, I got to do all this stuff, and then they don't even necessarily try the program because they see that and they don't want to try to get to the next step. So that's one of the things we want to do with our networking, is do punch through, and so that you don't have any of that sort of setup at all, and that'll help, I think, considerably for people that you know or have been scared away otherwise. So because of that, we're probably, you know, we got some more work to do on that, and then just just more kind of cleaning up and trying to make sure everything remains backward compatible. That's the other big thing. And so we have 850 add-ons in our store, I think, which are different games, different adventure modules, token packs, rule sets, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of those have extensions, and we just want to make sure that all of that continues to work, so that if people bought any of that stuff in the past, that they don't get over to Fantasy Grounds Unity and all their stuff's broke.
That would be a plus.
Yeah,
have your stuff broke on the pawns, right? The 2.5 minis.
Yeah.
So when they stand up, will it actually look like a pawn with the white background, or will it just be the silhouette?
So we might make that an optional thing. We're going to decide if we want to allow it to be a toggle sort of a thing, or if we want to make it just make our best call and then just have it be that way. But we've actually looked at both versions. So we have one where we have like where it's basically like a smooth, kind of like a tall rounded rectangle with like the image kind of overlaid like a typical pawn. But we also played around with doing automatic kind of dynamic cutouts, so that it's basically cut, along the edge of the miniature, and that looks pretty cool too.
Have you seen the flat pack minis from Arknight?
Yes, where it's basically see-through. Yeah.
So like that's what I thought of immediately. I'm like, well, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah. And the funny part is you can actually add a little bit of a depth to it. So it's called extruding in 3D space. So you take a 2D image and you basically like thicken it up so that it gives it a little bit of depth. So we could play around with that to come up with something that makes it look not just like a piece of flat paper, because you could potentially see it from the side. The other stuff we play around with is it's pretty easy for it to have it to where they always rotate perpendicular towards the camera. So as you move your camera around, so instead of it being, you're seeing like, the edge of a stand-up miniature, when you're sitting around a table and you're actually using the stand-up pawns, you can't always see clearly from every angle. But instead we could have it on a per player basis to where it always rotates it so you see the full, image each time. And so again, that's probably going to be an optional thing. Some people might like it, some people might not, because in some games it's important to know, am I attacking the back of the creature, the side of the creature? Other games don't care. So we'll have to that's probably going to have to be an option.
That was kind of my next question. Will they have facing?
Yeah. And so it should be an option.
And then like that, as soon as you start talking about how the camera pans, I'm like, well, how would that work with facing? How does it know to turn the front or the back? That kind of stuff.
And it could be both. I mean, you could potentially have a facing on the base of the token, and then still be able to see what it is. But I don't know. We'll play around with that, and then once we get to the beta, we'll kind of let users try it out and let us know what they think. And if people don't end up using one of the options, then we'll just turn it off to make it less confusing.
Gotcha. Well, I guess that's one of the things you guys will figure out as you get more data collected from people, using Fantasy Grounds.
Yeah.
So jumping into the chat here for the roll call, we got Frigginator in Tacoma, Washington. AJ is in Lopez Island, Washington. We've got Lincoln in Sweden. We got Tristan in North Carolina. Kyle is in Nelson, British Columbia. We got Australia with Raven. Paul is in Pittsburgh. Johnny Lee, 5000's Tampa, Florida. We got Newfoundland in the house with Christopher. Jeff Van Gogh is in Luxembourg. We got Minnesota with Evil Silly Putty. Wicked Kangaroo is in New South Wales, Australia. War Sheep is in Columbus, Ohio. Jamaica. I don't think we've had a Jamaica before. Oh, wait a minute. You're always in here, Noxus Jamaica. So I don't remember seeing you from Jamaica, though, which is always awesome. We've got Richard in Orlando, Florida. And we've got...
He's in my neck of the woods.
Yeah, Circleville, Ohio in the house with Geek in Undies. The One Lazy Guy is in Western Australia. We've got Lincoln, Nebraska with John Cyrus. And let's see if I missed anyone in between there. Sorry about that. It jumped on me. We got Andrew Hurd in Boston. Comic Book University in Galador. Beamer SRQ is in Redmond, Washington. So we got people chiming in from all over the place. And what'll happen too is as we keep talking, then they'll go back into the chat and start talking. And then once I go into the roll call, so I'm sure more places will start popping up. Is how that happens usually. John had a question. Are there plans for a feature that lets you group server aliases in block formats, so rotating DM in the same group have it easier to find their game if you play in many weekly games?
Yeah, so it's not going to be done as a grouping, but it's going to allow you to save a user assigned alias to a group so that you can just recall back and because that's just a no-brainer. It's something we probably should have put in a long time ago. It's just so that you can name the aliases, because I had the same thing when I connect in. So I'll connect in and do customer support with people sometimes, and that'll be mixed in with my regular games. And then when my regular weekly game shows up, I'm thinking, okay, so which one of my aliases was my real game versus my other one? And so, yeah, we'll have things where you can basically, that's another one of the features that we're looking to add to Fantasy Grounds Unity. We're playing around with that. So you have some kind of basic lobby functionality there to where you can, connect to the same people. You can have some friends list and stuff like that, see who's on, more easily find games. So, you don't have to go out to an external location and then, look on the game calendar, that kind of stuff. If you want to look for a one-shot, you can maybe find a one-shot directly within Fantasy Grounds instead of having to, go back out and do stuff. So yeah, that'll be improved.
And then Tristan has a question. Is there a subscription option that gives you access to official D&D content, or do you have to buy those outright?
So there is not right now, and that's something that I've seen asked before, and different levels of that same question have basically been asked. Some of them saying, hey, can I just subscribe and get everything that comes out? That's definitely not going to be the case, because we just have multiple publishers and we have licenses agreements with different publishers, and they're not going to all play into the same pool and then try to divide stuff out later. So that will never happen. Now, something with D&D could potentially happen down the road. Right now, I don't see it happening anytime soon, at least. But it's something that we can maybe revisit with Wizards of the Coast at some point in the future to see if that makes sense to shift it over to. Now, we did recently do a big major price cut on all of the D&D stuff. So I think the prices are much more affordable than what they used to be when they were basically everything was priced at MSRP retail price. So now you can get it for like $30 for the player's handbook material, or $30 for the monster manual. Adventures are $24 or $24 or $20 normally.
So I do have a question about data. You guys, harvest a lot of data to see how people are using Fantasy Grounds to try and figure out, improvements. What's the next move?
We have a little bit of stuff whenever you request the alias that kind of provides some basic information. We report on that not quite every quarter, but a lot of times I'll pull that data in and see what game systems people are running, and it needs a little bit of cleanup. So it's the data comes in a little bit garbled because people can create their own rule sets and stuff too. So sometimes I'm sure there are some games that are technically a Dungeons and Dragons game, but someone has made their own version of a rule set to play Dungeons and Dragons. So that might not get counted, but we're able to do some basic sort of stuff where we can say, okay, well, we know how many games of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition are running, 4th edition, Pathfinder, Savage Worlds, whatever. And then we can kind of use that to get some basic metrics. But we don't have a whole lot of other, I guess, analytics to really draw upon. Some stuff with extensions loaded, I think. We have some stuff that reports on extensions that are loaded so that we can see what's the most popular extensions.
So that being said, going forward, as you guys design Unity, have you thought about that going forward to where you can harvest the data in order to, add things to Fantasy Grounds that maybe people are looking for, or you find out maybe they're using it in ways you weren't expecting it, and you can kind of start incorporating that stuff forward?
Yeah, and that's something we could probably do some more of. It's always a fine line. You don't want to be overly intrusive with stuff either, because that's something that we take very seriously is the sensitivity of your data. And so some of that stuff could potentially be available, but we wouldn't want to necessarily pull up and say, okay, well, what type of character classes is everybody playing, that sort of stuff to that degree. But we also, one of the things that both John and I do, so John pretty much manages most of the support requests that come through the forums. I manage most of the actual customer service that comes through on email. And so that actually gives us a pretty good indication of where things are broken or confusing. And so we use that a lot of times to help drive what we build new functionality on, and where we focus our time. You know, if we get a lot of people asking questions about how do I do a map or an image or whatever, then we know that, okay, we probably got to clean that interface up some more, because, you know, I'm answering the same question too many times, you know?
Right. So, but that's definitely interesting because, you know, because they actually announced on D&D Beyond that they're literally like collecting all that information and using it, and you know, and they were putting it out on one of their streams last week. So that was what kind of made me think about that. And I guess I can see both sides, like the idea of, you know, not wanting to be intrusive and, you know, protecting the privacy, and then the other side going, well, how can we make this better? Using the information we kind of have access to.
Well, I did recently. I threw out kind of a prototype for something that I was personally interested in, which was basically analytics on your campaign after you run it. So I wrote a little program that takes a chat log. So whenever you play a game of Fantasy Grounds, within each session, it saves everything to a chat log, and it's a running kind of history. So that chat log just grows over the length of your campaign, and it's an HTML file, and it has everything that goes into the chat gets dropped into there. So you have some really cool stuff with regard to, you know, like your how many times you hit, how many times you miss, what dice rolls you have, and all that kind of stuff. And then you can run some analytics on that. So I took it and I dumped it out to, it's up on our forum somewhere. It's basically like a data sheet that tells you, you know, who dealt the most damage in a campaign, and all that kind of stuff. So if I was to take that and then marry it with your campaign's DB XML file, then that combination would allow me to see, you know, within each individual campaign, what type of character classes are doing the most damage, you know, what's your DPS scores and all that kind of stuff. But then we could then further extrapolate from there. As you had more and more people uploading their data into there, we could run queries across the board and come up with some really pretty cool stuff. And other stuff that's available that we could then potentially tie into that could be an option for people to say, yeah, I want to share all this information. We just want to make sure that we give the control of that over to the end user so they can decide whether or not they're going to share that information with us. But we could figure out, okay, if you load up your module state file, for instance, it'll tell us what modules you have loaded. If you load up your extension state file, it tells us what extensions you have loaded. So we could basically compile a list of, okay, these are the most popular extensions, and then these are the most popular modules, all that sort of stuff, and then use that to help drive, you know, future development.
Well, and that's actually a nice happy medium too, where they can opt in or opt out, know, depending on what they want to do. And then we can finally find out where the official ranger stacks.
Where it falls in. Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely a hot topic because I still say that the ranger is still great for doing damage. So I guess we've covered, you know, Unity and Fantasy Grounds. Where it's going? Like, so you're just playing in the one game now?
Just one game right now, and normally the weeks roll by so quick that I'm like, oh crap, it's Wednesday, and I'll have to like scramble to get ready to play, which is good because I can just hop in and play. And in fact, when I was running as a DM, I'm notorious about not prepping anymore. I just don't have much time to do that. So I would literally hop in and read the stuff for about 20 minutes before I ran this session, and be able to wing it pretty easily. So, and that's what we want the software to be able to do. We want it to be able to allow you to run the game without spending a whole bunch of time prepping.
That's kind of like that's why I don't like actually pre-written adventures, because I run everything kind of on the fly. Like I run a Tuesday night game every week, and I may have like a concept that I've cobbled together, you know, before we start, and then I just let my players interact with that, and they destroy my idea, and we go from there.
Yeah. And the best ideas the best games that I've ever run seem like they've always been stuff that's been just completely off the cuff, like unplanned stuff that we just rolled with it when it happened, and it ended up being, you know, the most memorable gaming moments.
And then in that game, actually half the players are using Fantasy Grounds for their characters, to keep track of their characters.
Okay, yeah.
And then, you know, then we have one like just regular old school pen and paper, and then we have another one that uses a combination of objects and pen and paper. So,
oh yeah, nice.
Yeah, she takes all of her she takes all of her spell slots and has like different colored stones for them, and
wow,
and uses that as her tracker.
Yeah,
as well as bardic inspiration and whatever else is going on. So she has physical representations for everything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I remember back when D&D 4th edition came out, and everybody had to print off cards of all their powers and abilities and flip things over and stuff, and it became very board gamey like for a while. So
it was a little bit like playing Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, yeah.
But some people really like that. I actually kind of liked having the cards in front of me to pick from.
Yeah, it was well balanced. I mean, so to be honest, I've never played a version of Dungeons and Dragons that I didn't like. I think I liked every version for different reasons. Like 2nd edition, I still have is one of my favorites just for the settings, but the mechanics of it, I've seen that the mechanics have generally improved as they've moved forward in the versions. But definitely the settings I like. And then I liked 3rd edition a lot. And then 3.5 came out, and I was like, oh, I can't believe there's another version. But I ended up thinking, okay, well that cleaned up some things, and I enjoyed 4th edition. I enjoyed 5th edition. I still play Pathfinder sometimes. I'm actually off and on. I've been running a game of Pathfinder for my son, trying to introduce him in it, and he connects and plays with his actually with his grandfather, who's a gamer. He plays online, and my son plays downstairs, and I GM from my office here. So that's been pretty fun. And then I've got another one of my high school buddies that joins in. And so that one, they're playing Gestalt characters because I've only got 3 players. And so I let them basically take 2 classes and combine it into a combination of the best of both classes' abilities. And that makes them pretty powerful, but they're able to, fight through encounters that are meant for more players.
Yeah, we back in 3.5, we actually ran a Gestalt campaign as well. And we went crazy and added monster templates and
oh yeah.
It was like, you're a Gestalt, here's your ECL, go crazy, and they did.
Yeah. I mean, that can be fun. So I mean, I like all different types of games. I like high-powered games, like low-powered games. I just like the variety of it. The more games I play, if a DM has a real strong opinion on how they want to run the game, then that's the most important thing for me is like, yeah, I can run pretty much any kind of game.
I don't think I've ever played in an RPG that I haven't really had fun with. Like, there are some systems I prefer over others, and I kind of give some systems a hard time. But at the end of the day, if a group of people that I want to play with are playing that game, I'll have fun playing it.
Yeah.
Because once you get into the game, like eventually the mechanics start like falling away.
Yeah. And different games are more role-playing centric versus more, tactical and stuff, but I like both. So, it doesn't really offend me to shift into one mode or the other. I enjoy the game for what it is and I don't try to bend it too much. If it, like 4th edition, I felt like was very tactical. You still had room for role-playing, but, when I played that game, I just put myself into more of a tactical mindset.
Well, it just the rules just lent themselves to doing that thing really well. So it is easier to fall into that. We even played like a one-shot online game, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, with the Palladium system. And again, like I'm not particularly fond of that system, but the game, we had an awesome GM run the game, and the players were there to play and have fun. So it was a fun game.
Yeah, I always would love to see that game system made into a new video game, because to me the character creation of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was like the most fun ever. Like, to say you want to start off with, and I think unless there was multiple Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games, which I could be confused, but didn't they have it where you could basically pick, okay, do you want to be an elephant, and then you have so many evolution points, and you can say, okay, is your trunk able to hold weapons now? Is it a prehensile trunk, or is it a short stub, and all that kind of stuff? So
yeah, that was absolutely the game. I think I played a hippopotamus.
Nice.
Yeah, a sumo wrestler hippopotamus.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, to me that looked like a lot of fun.
So Kilano, hey there, Doug. Just wanted to say thanks. I loved your client as it is allowed me to play with my friends periodically after I left my home state for work. The latest update is great. So you definitely got some fans out there.
Good deal. Good deal. Yeah, every once in a while we'll roll out an update, and so the big thing with our updates is we allow community extensions, and so we did have something where I think one of the popular community extensions broke or caused a conflict with our new update, but we're working on ways that we can improve that sort of process too.
I imagine every time you add a new update like that's when you're going to get a flurry of love and hate at the same time.
Yep. Pretty much. And it depends on everyone's personal experience, like, and I can relate, if I load up a game system that I played and something's not working all of a sudden, I don't care why it's not working. I'm going to be irritated by it, so, we're working on ways that we can better communicate when a new update is going to roll out that has the potential to maybe break something that you're using, but we try not to.
So, John, Doug, I've been on FG since 2008, also from Damned and John D and the forum High. So
okay, cool.
Another fan out there. So which is awesome. So we're coming right up on the hour mark. So is there anything you want to leave people off with? Go sign up for Fantasy Grounds.
Yeah, I would just say if you've not tried it at all, for anyone who's watching the stream and just was curious about what Fantasy Grounds is, we have a 30-day money-back guarantee on all purchases and subscriptions from our store on fantasygrounds.com. You can try it out, see if it works for you. Our forums are pretty open and friendly, so if you have any questions along the way, you can typically find people to help you get up and running. And a lot of times people will even hop into your game or let you join into their game and show you the ropes too. So it's a very welcoming community, and just give it a shot, and then if you're unhappy for any reason at all, shoot us an email at support@fantasygrounds.com, and we do give refunds for people. We give refunds for people that say, hey, I bought this stuff, but now I just lost my job, and I need every dollar I could find, can I get a refund? And then I'll come back later on. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what the reason is. If it's within 30 days, we'll get you hooked back up. So it's really a no risk sort of a trial. And I would say sign up for our newsletter if you're not already on it too. There you can get notifications whenever we have things that go on sale, new releases, that sort of stuff. We post that up to our Facebook page as well. It's just facebook.com/fantasygrounds.
Do you guys have a con?
We have, there's a con called FG Con, which is completely community sponsored and run. So there's one that runs, I think it's October 13th, Friday the 13th, if I'm not mistaken. And we have a whole section on our forum for FG Con. There's also another one that periodically runs throughout the year called FG Days, DAYZ, but it's like normally a single day each time. Those are typically a good way to try out Fantasy Grounds as well as a player and to try out different systems. So they're basically one-shots that Dungeon Masters are running that almost, we upgrade all Dungeon Masters to an Ultimate license during the period of that con. So anyone can play for free. All you need is a demo license. You can get in, you can try out a new system, play it. It's a great way to find new groups of people too, because I know when I first got into Fantasy Grounds, it was because I was moving from Illinois back to my home state of Kentucky. And, I was thinking I was going to play with that group, but I had a couple grognards in the group that didn't have fast internet at home, or they didn't have hardly any internet at home. They had an old computer. They just didn't want to try gaming online. And I ended up playing with people I'd never met in person all over the country and multiple countries actually. And found that the experience was pretty much the same. And I really enjoyed it.
Gamers are gamers no matter where you are.
Exactly.
Just some of them are willing to you get online and some aren't. So one last question that Jan asked, is there any news regarding the potential release of Mercer's Tal'Dorei campaign guide for Fantasy Grounds?
So we have someone that's been working on it. We do not have permission to release it yet, but we are working on that to see if we can. Basically, it's Green Ronin, which we have a license with Green Ronin, and we've got a lot of their, a decent number of their stuff in our store, a handful, I guess. And then, but they are actually working with Geek and Sundry. So it's a 2 license situation. So those things always get a little bit more complicated whenever you have an extra hand in the pot, basically, that, you know, everyone has to sign off and approve. So if Green Ronin's able to secure permission from Geek and Sundry, then they'll pass that through to us, and we'll push it out. So it's an unknown right now. We're hoping that we can release it.
So there you go. Maybe.
Yep. Maybe.
Working on it. So with that, I want to thank you for coming on, Doug. I really appreciate you giving us your time today. And thanks everyone for hanging out in the chat. And thank you for coming and hanging out, even though I switched the time on you by a little bit. But until next time, and tomorrow we'll be back at the normal time. So until next time, guys, stay nerdy.